oh, why are you talking about DissociaDID? DissociaDID's a dead topic. Why don't you keep going about DissociaDID? Leave her alone. Shh. 3 videos is hardly milking it. And I can't help it if Nin continually spouts rubbish and supports the dodgiest people known to man. 2 months ago, I made my part 2 of the problems with DissociaDID, and I intended it to be my last video on Nin, because what else could I say? I had covered everything, but it turns out I haven't in fact covered everything, and it gets worse, my friends. It gets even worse. 2,000 years of oppressive ideology worse. Grand. I love that for me. If you're tired hearing about it, imagine how tired we are experiencing it. We are all collectively, as a group, tired. And if you don't understand what 2,000 years of oppression refers to, I'm going to give you a small backstory before I go into the actual problems with DissociaDID and why the people that she advocates for and the ideas she supports are, drumroll please, anti-Semitic. Yeah. We've got anti-Indigenous sentiments and questionable support for the hashtag All Lives Matter movement on Nin's behalf. And now we've got Jews suck, so that's all nice and good. Now, before I even go into the history of this and the people she's supporting, I know one of the comments I'm going to get is, what if Nin didn't know about this? You can't call her anti-Semitic if she didn't know about this. And my response to that is, Nin is supposed to be an educational service that does her research. So even if she didn't know about any of this, it just goes to show that she does no research, has no idea what she's talking about, and is a charlatan and a fraud. So is that really better? To ignorantly spread these ideas when you proclaim to be an educational service. A concept that requires credibility, and if you don't have that credibility anymore because it's shown that you don't do your research, everything just falls apart like dominoes? You tell me. I'm going to have to give you some background to make sense of what I'm going to be referring to in regards to Nin and the people that she supports. And I'll be reading from the Times of Israel, and yes, I notice and I acknowledge that this is an Israeli and therefore Jewish publication. However, everything mentioned in this has citations and support for it. In 1475, a toddler named Simon was found dead in the town of Trento, Italy. The boy's corpse was discovered on Easter Sunday in the cellar of a Jewish family's house. The Jewish leaders of Trento were immediately held responsible for the ritual murder of young Simon. All the Jews of the town were arrested, tortured, forced to confess to the slaying. I just want to say that obviously confessions obtained via torture are often inaccurate, but even more obviously than that, not all the Jews in this town would have been responsible for this singular incident. So there's that too. It's called a scapegoat, my friends, and you're going to hear about this a lot more in the coming information. The events in Trento were not the first time a Jewish community was held collectively responsible for the ritual of a Christian child. Back in 1144, in Norwich, England, a 12-year-old boy named William was similarly found dead. Years later, his murder was blamed on local Jews. For 3 centuries, the accounts of Jewish ritual had been confined to local law and monastic chronicles. There was not a widespread access to the tales, so the blood libel had little credibility to the public. Then, in the mid-15th century, Gutenberg's printing press changed everything. As books, broadsheets, and other printed materials proliferated on the continent, millions of people gained access to many forms of knowledge, including quote-unquote factual blood libel accounts. Historian Magda Tita wrote a book, Blood Libel, on the Trail of an Anti-Semitic Myth, examined the blood libel from its roots in monastic tales to the pages of German 1940s political party broadsheets. So if you don't want to listen to the Times of Israel, we can have a look at the BBC. The allegations behind blood libel originate in the Middle Ages, when Jews were falsely accused of ritualized murder, in particular of children. The allegations were used to justify violence against Jews. If you're still not content that this is a thing that has been stated over and over again, that this theory is believed and has been used to oppress Jews off of the back of thousands of years of anti-Semitic oppression, let's have a look at TNR and let's talk about a monk called Monmouth. After the death of William, the 12-year-old boy in 1144 who was found dead, the monk laid out an account of his death in unsubstantiated, excruciating detail. But even in that same account, authored in 1173, the monk was not content to limit the image of depravity to the Jews of a single city in eastern England. Instead, drawing upon a second-hand source, a monk named Theobald, who supposedly converted from Judaism after hearing the miracles of St. William of Norwich, Monmouth depicted a grimmer, larger scheme. He verily told that in the ancient writing of his fathers it was written that the Jews, without the shedding of human blood, could neither obtain their freedom, nor could they ever return to their fatherland, Monmouth wrote. Hence it was laid down by them in ancient times that every year they must sacrifice a Christian in some part of the world to the Most High God in scorn and contempt of Christ, and that they might avenge their sufferings on him. If you're wondering whether or not this theory is prevalent today, I'm going to show you this picture from when the Capitol building was not even infiltrated by the right, just the right walked into the Capitol building without any consequences at that time whatsoever. Here's a person with a QAnon shirt. We're going to go into QAnon shortly. QAnon is essentially blood libel rebranded. And then there's SRA, Satanic Ritual, which is blood libel rebranded. I want to state right now that I do believe people go through organized abuse and or that contains religious, spiritual or ritualistic elements. However, SRA, Satanic Ritual, is a debunked alt-right sociological phenomenon and a moral panic. SRA is a conspiracy theory, and it's very specifically referring to theory. So when I say SRA is not a thing, I'm not saying that people don't go through organized and or that contains religious, spiritual or ritualistic elements. I'm saying that SRA, the theory that is essentially an anti-Semitic theory rebranded, doesn't exist. I've talked about blood libel, but how does blood libel relate to SRA, Satanic Ritual? How can Jews be grouped in with Satanists? So I'm going to bring in my friend Jessie Quinn to discuss the history of Jews being equated to being Satanists or being like Satanists.
Hi, I am Jessie Quinn, and as you can see, I use they, them pronouns. Apologies for the bed not being made behind me. It probably looks like there is one cat sleeping there, but in fact, it's two gray cats. I just couldn't bring myself to disturb them in order to make the bed look nice behind me. To start off, I think it's important to note that one of the motivators for linking Jews with the Christian devil is the rejection of Jesus as Messiah, and also possibly that really gross anti-Semitic rumor that Jews Jesus. That one will never make sense to me, but whatever. I mean, if we're refusing to accept the Savior and an offer to get into heaven, then surely we must be worshiping the devil. No other explanation. The term satanic ritual, as Charlie mentioned, is really just blood libel rebranded, and it's very, very different from religious. It follows the idea that Jews need to Christian babies in order to use their blood to make matzah, which makes me think that Christians don't know how to make any kind of bread. Or at least the Christians that came up with this rumor didn't. Instead of the matzah thing, sometimes Christians think that Jews need this blood for the 4 cups of wine in the Passover Seder, which is, at the very least, closer to the correct color. I don't know why they couldn't fathom a devout group of people who are literally commanded to turn the up, but Christians today still don't get it, so I can't really hold it against them. When in doubt, you can usually count on the reason for doing things in Judaism being partying. or getting laid. Satanic ritual was first coined in 1980 in the book Michelle Remembers, written by Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pasder, and it alleged that child was linked to satanic rituals. You're probably more familiar with this than you think because this book, along with a concurrent court case regarding child at a preschool, were able to capitalize on precipitated fears coming from increased media coverage of the various serial since the Manson in 1969, such as the Zodiac or Alphabet, which utilized ritual in their or in their choosing of victims, as well as the massive laundry list of serial from the 1970s. If you've ever listened to my favorite, then you probably know where I'm going with this. Basically, people were freaked out, and Michelle Remembers catapulted us into the satanic panic of the 1980s and 90s. According to CBC News, this book was one of the first accounts to suggest that there was an underground network working to infiltrate communities and convert others to the occult. And I'm not sure if Charlie's ever mentioned it here, but that's basically what gets said about the Jewish people. One of the oldest documented examples of this since the Jewish emancipation in Europe was the Dreyfus Affair, which I have mentioned in 3 videos within the last month and a half. Very freaky, very weird, not sure what to make of that. What happened was the French military arrested and charged Colonel Alfred Dreyfus of selling French military secrets to the German government, despite there being little to no evidence of this. This is one of the most important instances of Jews being accused of disloyalty to their country, second only to the Holocaust. The Dreyfus Affair was the culmination of thousands of years of Jews being seen as others, and the claims of disloyalty were given more credence due to Jews establishing an international network of trade and merchants, because that was like those were like the only jobs that we were allowed to have. If you've ever heard the phrase globalists, that's referring to us. You're welcome. Because Jews have been seen as outsiders and infiltrators for so long, you combine that with the antiquated lie of blood libel, and you end up where we are now, where satanic ritual basically boils down to an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory meant to keep people afraid of anything that isn't puritanical and good Christian fun. So there you go. Just be wary of anything that has to do with blood libel or calls an outsider the devil. Thank you so much, and I will pass it back over to Charlie.
So let's go into the SRA conspiracy theory. SRA, much like blood libel, is a moral panic. For example, the serial panic of the 80s. While that doesn't mean that people like Charles Manson and Jeffrey Dahmer didn't exist, a lot of people took it to the next level because of the media, fearing that there would be a serial every single turn. In the same regard, people who believe in SRA think that there are groups of people who hide out in forests, wearing robes, sacrificing children to the devil, including acts such as cannibalism, bestiality, and necrophilia. Can there be instances of abuse like this happening? Absolutely. Are there groups, dozens of groups, of political officials and religious leaders camped out in a forest with a little fire having a kiki before committing ritualistic murder? No. Let's talk about the people and the groups that support this theory that has absolutely no basis. There is, of course, Dr. Remy Aquarone, I don't care, the man that we talked about, who isn't actually legally able to diagnose and hasn't been trained in diagnosing anyone, and yet DissociaDID claims that he diagnosed them. But he's a psychoanalytic therapist, and in the United Kingdom, only psychiatrists can diagnose. So Dr. Remy Aquarone walking around saying that he's some kind of professional when he's not even qualified to diagnose is astonishing to me. He really is into the idea that these groups exist in mass, so much so he kind of inserted himself into Operation Midland, an inquiry between November 2014 to March 2016 by the Metropolitan Police in London, investigating several claims of this occurring. Do you know what happened? Nothing. There was absolutely no substantial evidence that any of these people, bar 2, were actually involved in this. bar two. Two people out of the dozens listed actually had any evidence on them and were apprehended. And the culprit who was responsible for these false accusations, Carl Beach, was later himself arrested for child because he in fact wasn't undesirable. After it was discovered that the majority of the people who were accused were innocent, they were still left with damaged lives and reputations, and Dr. Remy and his pals wrote a letter explaining that Carl was damaged because as psychologists and psychoanalytic therapists, they can recognize that he was damaged. And it's like, Remy, you don't have to be a psychologist to understand that Carl Beach, with his own crimes and his own false accusations, was damaged. Thank you for explaining that to us. And as if that excuses him from defaming multiple people who were completely innocent to begin with. They also note in this letter that, well, two were found. Like, it's fine, we ruined the lives of this list of people who did nothing wrong, but at least we found two of them. Yep, one of the people who signed this letter was one Valerie Sinason, and Valerie Sinason has a special place in my heart for being scum, and I'm going to explain why. Sinason is a doctor, but not a doctor of psychology or psychiatry or even of medicine, as you would imagine. She's a doctor of philosophy. So you would probably get the same quality of psychological and or psychiatric advice from someone who had a PhD in English literature. That's how qualified Dr. Valerie Sinason is. You know, there's always like a running joke that doctors in subjects that aren't actually medicine are kind of useless. Like in Friends, when everyone's like, Ross, you might be a doctor of paleontology, but if I have a heart attack, you're not going to be much help. That's like the same thing here. She's just as useful. I might be rambling a bit. It just truly tickles me how Valerie Sinason is so proud of her PhD and doctorate. But she's really only qualified to talk about Plato's allegory of the cave in great detail and not your mental health. And don't get me wrong, I love Plato's allegory of the cave. Greeks running around spouting ideas that are woke and galaxy-brained is like my thing. But I wouldn't trust this woman with my mental health if my life depended on it. Speaking of whether my life depended on it, I'm actually going to get into a serious and sad story. Carol Felstead was treated for 8 weeks by Valerie Sinason. She insisted that Carol was an SRA victim, the first that she'd treated. She obtained a £22,000 grant to document patients of SRA, but was unable to produce hard evidence. Carol later was found dead in her flat. People assume suicide, but her actual cause of death is unknown. Her brother has a TED Talk talking about this and how he believes Sinason essentially implanted false memories of SRA in his sister. Sinason really likes to emphasize the fact that she's not religious, but goes out of her way to talk to certain religious publications, such as the Catholic Herald. We're going to go on to that shortly as well. Miss Sinason, who has been advising the Metropolitan Police about possible ritual elements of the Thames murders, claims the scale of ritual is in fact so great it amounts to Auschwitz in peacetime. You heard that right. Apparently, these things that happen but have no evidence for happening are the same as Auschwitz. And if you want to understand why that is an anti-Semitic statement, you can go back and watch my videos on why I talk about comparisons to the is anti-Semitic in itself. I also find her choice of publications to be interesting, because while SRA is an unsubstantiated conspiracy theory, do you know who do have proven allegations of within its institutions? The Catholic Church. It's almost as if SRA is actually a cover-up for the abuse going on within the Catholic Church. And so the people who are saying that SRA is being covered up are actually just covering up yet another scandal, except one is substantiated and the other is not. It's almost as if these figureheads are talking to specific publications because the Catholic Church have something to hide, and it would be beneficial to them if they could have something else to point at and say, look at this thing, look at that, not us. I don't know, guys, it just sounds like a bit of a pattern, not only to mention the animosity between Jewish people and, well, the rest of Europe, considering that the history of the Jews has been being bounced from country to country because they kept being chased out of the previous country. And after that started happening and people started to hate Jews more, blood libel came up, and that was another reason to get rid of the Jews. Not only did they kill Jesus, they also eat your babies, and it's almost as if there's still that going on, except they've just slightly changed the name, even though Jews have been associated with Satanism for an unknown reason, probably to further the stigmatization of Jewish people. So, to wrap up, essentially, it's almost like all of this is built off of anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish sentiment from anti-Semitism in Europe, which came from previous centuries worth of anti-Semitism across the world, and also anti-Semitism within the Catholic Church, and the wish for them to cover up their own scandals and have a scapegoat for them. So, is there a pattern? You tell me. And of course, DissociaDID promotes Dr. Remy Aquarone and Sinason and various other people who signed that letter regarding the false SRA claims. And the other things those figureheads have done have been less than stellar. And then some of those figureheads are either directly associated with other organizations or harbour the same beliefs as other organisations such as QAnon, a disproven and discredited far-right theory alleging that a secret cabal of Satan-worshipping cannibalistic pedophiles are running global child trafficking rings and plotted against the former US President Donald Trump while he was in office. This particular SRA organisation has consistently been linked with anti-Semitic and white supremacist material. Grand. And then there's first person plural. Yeah, the charity in which DissociaDID raised money for. And oh, they reference Dr. Remy Aquarone, you know, after he did the whole Operation Midland and it all went to hell and people were accused wrongly. Dr. Sinason, who made £22,000 off a patient she would eventually lose without even being a professional in the field she was supposed to be working in, and also thinks that the is just a fun little comparison tool that she can use, ignoring that people are still alive today who suffered through that. And also talks to Catholic publications when the Catholic Church was hiding some things that I think she would probably consider to be ritualistic. So what you can glean from this video is that DissociaDID supports the idea, but not only the idea, the figureheads that continue to spout rhetoric about an ancient, centuries-old anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Not only that, DissociaDID supports people who are happy to misrepresent and defame others who are innocent of all crimes, and those who exploit and manipulate their own patients to put them in positions that they should never have been put in because they never experienced the things that the therapist was insistent they did. And not only that, this theory is currently linked to white supremacist anti-Semites who think that these Satan cannibalistic pedophiles are plotting against Trump. DissociaDID, if you actually believe in this theory that's been proven to be a moral panic, reevaluate the evidence and maybe do your research on the phenomenon and the people that you are so eager to promote. I thought you were an educational service. What happened to the research in education?